morning, everyone. I am Abhinav Agarwal, your host for today. I am also the curator of Indica Books, and welcome to our very first Writers Open House with Otis of 2022. And for those of you who happen to watch this for the first time after it's put up on YouTube, this is a weekly session that the Indica and Indica Books conducts with Otis. The intent is, excuse me, as the title of the series says, Writers Open House. So we invite people to send in short writing pieces, 800 to 900 words or so, to Otis in a particular format, which makes it easier for him to review, edit, and send his feedback. And then when we convene and meet on Sundays, Otis takes those pieces one by one, reviews them, gives us feedback. This is your chance to, if you have sent in a piece, to ask questions and get some doubts about best practices about writing, the technique, the style of writing clarified. And for others, it gives them an opportunity to see other people's writing pieces and also learn from not only the submissions, but also the feedback that Otis provides. I am going to share the link to the announcement where you can find information on where to send your piece, what format to do it, and so on. And with that, I am going to turn this over to Otis, and a happy new year to everyone.
Okay, can you all hear me? Happy New Year. Uh, it's great to see you and great to get started again. Abhinav, I was thinking too about our format, and I probably should just talk to you about this a little bit before, but like looking at today's setup, we have four pieces. It would be so great for us to think about a way that you all, and we also have kind of a core group. It would be great to figure out how we can keep the core group and then also be able to include new people that want to come in and submit. But all the people who have submitted this time are definitely from kind of a core group. And it would be awesome for us to maybe think about a way that you all could share your pieces with each other and read them. And then we could have a kind of, I think we're at the point where we could kind of have a different discussion. It's really great in a workshop for you all to read pieces, and I'm sure that there's a number of you that could read pieces and start to you basically, like, instead of having the little Otis on your shoulder, that little parrot Otis, that goes da 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 da, and won't shut up, then you become that person that starts, saying those things, and that starts to internalize stuff so that when you're actually writing, that person is even present within yourself. um, I think that that's part of the process. It was part of the process for me. I had these demons, these demon parrots also on my shoulder when I was coming up. One of them was named Bill Harrison, I will tell you, the who I've often come back to, who said, I would rather have cut off both my hands at the wrist than write this paragraph. Yes, that voice was in my head. So it's it's something that maybe we can think about. I don't know if there can be some kind of clearinghouse because the pieces are short. All of these pieces are very readable. So, and I'm certain that when I look at these four, I know that all four people who have submitted here would also be able to comment on other people's work. So, something for us to think
Yeah.
about.
Let me think about that, and perhaps during the week or in the second half of the week, you and I can get into a discussion and see if we can come up with a process, a procedure that will you know that'll work with everyone.
Yeah, this yeah, again, it's just like probably a logistic task, but I mean, this set of readings took me about an hour. It wouldn't take anyone else any longer than that. It might even go quicker since you don't feel as much responsibility as me to read and comment on the whole
Yeah.
piece. Yeah, maybe we can just think about it, or yeah, okay. So let's put it that way. Ram, let's start with you, please. Get us warmed up. Ram,
Yes.
how are you?
Can you hear me? I'm good. I'm
Yep.
good. How are you?
Great. How was your new year? How's the new year so far for everybody? Maybe that's the question to ask.
The new year is quite good. Yeah.
Not too bad, not too bad. The last week of the previous year was nice. It was kind of slow, even if I, for instance, was not really on PT or gone anywhere. Work was slow. The influx of emails was very it was down to a trickle. So that definitely helped. And last week felt like the floodgates had opened again.
Oh gosh. Okay, Ram, let me share my screen and
Sure.
okay. I don't know why this is right here. That's a weird place for it to be. Oh gosh, why are you doing this to me? Right in the middle of what I'm sharing is this thing that says I'm sharing my screen. And I don't know how to move it. Oh, there we go. Okay. Let's see. If I look at this piece. Okay, maybe read. Can you read the first page, Ram, and then tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about what you're doing in this piece.
I'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
The private garden of Rama and Sita, the king and queen of Ayodhya, was awash with the scent of spring blossoms. The purple-hued passion flower, with its hairy tendril-like petals, hung heavily from creepers, casting a fragrance worthy of its name. The white petals of the night jasmine, flowering in thick bunches, cracked open lazily, as if yawning after slumber, teasing with a sample of the heavy fragrance that would sally forth as night approached. The late evening sun cast golden beams, the soft angular fingers spreading a gentle warmth on the skin like a light brew of Madeira spreads fire down the throat on a cold night. Sita, her head on Rama's lap, lay on a swing that rocked back and forth, the squeak squeak of the hinges punctuated by the choo choo gutter gutter of bird calls. A branch overhead rustled aside, touching a beam of sunshine to her face. Rama's hand dashed to shield her from the harshness of the soft evening sun, but stopped. Her translucent skin glowed golden at the touch of mellow sunlight. Unable to decide whether to shield her face or stare at it, he stroked her forehead gently. Sita brought his hand to her lips and kissed it softly. The touch of his rough fingers, calloused by years of drawing the bowstring on her soft lips, sent a shiver of thrill down her spine. Rama's fingers stayed still. Is something bothering you? She asked, gazing into his eyes, past the smile on his lips. The cares of running a kingdom, Rama sighed. Sita twined her fingers around his. Do you still long for the forest life? She asked. Rama nodded. It's been more than a year, but still. Sita squeezed his hand. I know you miss the solitude of the forests, the stillness of nature, and her eyes twinkled, my constant company. Rama smiled nervously.
Okay, good. Yeah, tell us a little bit about this piece. I realize as you're reading that I, I might, depending on how we're going, I might have you read a little bit at the end, or I'd least like you to discuss the entire arc of this piece. This story seems like it may be complete. Is it complete in seven
Yeah, it is
pages?
complete.
Okay,
It's
yeah. So
complete.
that's great. That's the great thing. Okay, go ahead. Tell us a little bit about this piece.
This I wrote. There was a writing website that had called for some submissions for a particular purpose, and I wrote this story for that. This is based on the Ramayana, and Rama and Sita, as we all know, went on a forest exile for 14 years. Sita was abducted, and then Rama went and killed Ravana, and then he brought her back. And then to make sure that her character would not be questioned by people, she walked through fire and came unscathed. All that happened, and then after all this, they come to Ayodhya. In the Ramayana, after they come to Ayodhya, while Sita is pregnant with Rama with their children, there is a little bit of gossip about Sita, that there is a little bit of fingers that are pointed at Rama, saying that how could he accept her even though she had lived under somebody else's roof for 1 year. And in the Ramayana, Rama banishes her to the forest. What I have written is a bit of a speculative fiction on this part of mythology, where Rama convinces his people. He doesn't accept what they are saying, but he realizes that his people are thinking wrong, and he makes them see what is right. And he does not banish her in the story. So that's basically what the story is. And this is how I would have loved to see it happen. And this is my little bit of speculative fiction.
Okay. Um, okay. Good. So with this piece, I think I feel like there is this, noticeable arc from the beginning to the end. But when we, but I'm not completely centered in the story, and it's largely because of point of view. So there's just a couple little things that are happening early on. Um, so I noticed one thing about, for one, the piece as a whole is sort of seems idealized to me,
Yeah, it
and
is.
I think that's something that we as writers really have to think about in this way.
Okay.
When we idealize a world, it becomes also a world that our reader um, cannot really understand. I mean, they may want to understand it. It's sort of like, it's like a Disney movie. I mean, the kinds of
Right.
Disney movies that they had in the 1950s. Even now, when they make a Disney movie now, they actually, undercut a lot of that idealism, right? So
Right.
if we think about those images that probably
That's
as
a fair
well as
point.
I do, like I can't even get them out of my head of like, that old Cinderella, um, the old Cinderella cartoon, or she's coming out, and she's doing the dress, and the birds come and like do the dress for her, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's not reality. And so like now
Mhm.
now they'll do that same thing, and the birds will come in and they'll poop on the dress or something like that, right? And it's like so they're like basically making fun of that
Yeah.
convention of
Right.
idealization.
Right.
The
That's a fair
the
point. Yeah.
issue Right, but the issue of idealization is something that all of us, I'm really going to hope that we can just sort of embed it in our mind, because it's not idealization itself. Don't think like, oh, idealization bad. That's not the point. The point is that our reader has to be able to identify with the world, and in that way they find the story relevant to their lives.
Right.
So like for me, like where there's a number there, yeah, I mean, you start off, I mean, I think when you're starting off here in the story, you're already sort of imaginatively idealizing it. And so that's something that you need
Yes.
to sort of like take the lamp of introspection and turn it upon
Okay.
yourself and say, why am I doing this? Right? And when
Right.
you're a writer, I mean, the deep thing about us as a writer is there's nothing that we're doing. This is what I love about writing for as a tool for our own kind of self-examination. Actually, it's like when you look inward, you have to say like, well, I'm doing that for a reason. Everything we do as a writer, all we do when we write is make choices. So
Yes.
all we're doing is
True.
making choices. And when we make one choice, we're also very clearly not making any other choice. So the
Mm.
question is why, right?
Right.
Like why do you, for example, not want to see these characters as real people? And instead you want to see
Mm.
them in an idealized world, as idealized people. That's really what we get to. I'm not trying to point the finger just at you, but for all of us to realize. I'll just say
Right.
that again. When everything we do on the page is a choice, whether it's conscious or subconscious, unfortunately, right? So everything is a choice. And whenever we make a choice, we also don't make every other choice. It's amazing. I mean, like you couldn't ask for a more intense vision into oneself if you should go look at it, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah, it's
and
true.
uh, and so
No, what you
so
said,
that's
can I just add something?
yeah.
When I look back in retrospect at this story, I completely agree with you that as a reader, found it a little difficult to identify with both the characters and the incidents in the story when I looked at it as a reader. And I thought why that is happening, and my reasoning was that this is happening because in this story there is no primal emotion that is coming out that the reader can identify with. So these
Ah,
primal emotions
okay.
like maybe loss, maybe death, maybe of a need for recognition. So that primal emotion is missing in the story, which is why it is not relatable. I feel that if that primal emotion is there, that a reader can identify with, then I can create even a Harry Potter kind of world.
I don't know. Harry Potter would is not my choice in terms of I mean I've read a page or two of
Sure.
Harry Potter. I'm like I cannot understand what the hell's going on here. I mean I'm like lost.
Right.
Um, they made good movies and people seem to accept it.
Of
So
course.
far be for me to say. Well, okay,
Sorry.
so I think that that's a great comment, Ram. Like we could think about this story in regard to that. It's like basically, you have a story of Rama. I mean, if we were thinking about what the emotional issues are, is that you have Rama
Right.
who's attached to Sitya, Sita,
Right.
maybe Sita,
Sita. Yeah.
and okay. Well, I have to. I'm so looking forward. I've decided that when I take my trip to India, which I'm really excited about taking, that I'm going to study uh, Hindu for one thing. Is it Hindu or Hindi? I don't. When you say the language,
The language is Hindi.
Hindi. Yeah. So I look forward to studying Hindi. That will be good. I tried it. I tried it on that little app. It's got to be one of the
Okay.
hardest languages to learn on the app. I mean, I was just like, this is very hard. I'll get all my pronunciations down. So I look forward to that. Okay, so Rama is. It seems to me that if you were trying to use emotion, you would probably have to center in on Rama because he's the one that is an actor here, and
Yeah.
you have to think about.
Right.
We're going to get to this. This is actually the theme of our week, but the movement of story is that we need a protagonist. They meet the force of the antagonistic force, which creates energy, and then we have a change of state. It's almost like the conservation of matter, if you want to think of it that way, right? They say the conservation of matter and energy. One mass meets another mass, it creates energy, and then a change of state. This is what we're doing in a story.
Right.
And we are going to go over that a number of times. So if I was thinking about this story with that as my mindset, and we should, okay, so the thing is, let me say now that every story that is successful, I believe, is essentially uh, a depiction of this basic physical principle. Mass comes into contact
Yeah.
with diametrically opposed mass, which creates the maximum amount of energy and results in a change of state. Every successful
Right.
story starts at that. So we need to have that as our base. And then when we have that as our base, we're now in competition with every other story that's also doing that. So that means we
Correct.
have to take that base and now make it the best of the type. And so that is a story. Now we have to compete with every other story. This has not gotten to that level of story for a couple of reasons. The One thing that happens here is I marked it the point of view shifts back and forth. So we
Yeah.
actually don't know what this first thing is, right? This, right? It's coming this way. We don't know what it is. Is it
Right.
Rama? Is it Sita? Who is it? Is it both of
Right.
them? It can be Rama, it can be Sita, it can be both of them. But no matter who it is, it could be a crowd of people. It could be the townspeople if you wanted to. Um, there's been some successful stories written. Um, I don't know if I remember. Anthony Doerr wrote his first collection of short stories is a tour de force in creating protagonists and giving himself difficulties. He has a they protagonist. There's another fabulous story with a we protagonist. So you can see that you can have groups, you can have whatever you want. You could have a people. I mean, obviously, people do this all the time. People create stories about, right? There's stories about India, right? India is a massive people, but India versus da 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 da. And then this is the outcome. It's exceptionally variable, but we have to know what it is. If we don't know what this
Correct.
is, then it cannot meet this, right? So this must be defined for us in the reader's mind, and we have to know absolutely what it is. Is it Sita? Is it
I
Rama?
see Ravi has raised his hand. If you,
Oh,
please,
thank you.
you can go ahead and ask your question, Ravi.
Yeah, thank you, Abhinav, for mentioning that, because once you see I get in a roll, I cannot diverge. Yeah, Ravi?
Yeah, hello.
Yeah, you had a question?
Actually, I was not able to interact with you last time. I have actually resent you that PDF file in which you have marked my story. So I wanted to know from you how you, what you liked about it and what you didn't like about it. But this was actually 1.5 years ago. So I don't know
Oh,
if that's okay.
okay. So I have not seen that piece again. I only started looking at,
I've just mailed you right now at your @me.com email address. So you can check it out.
um, oh, at my address. Okay, so I won't look at that until next week. So
Okay, okay, no
a
worries.
good schedule for me will be, I actually have to be so much more in control of my schedule. So I will be reading pieces for the Sunday session on Friday. So I need to get them before 12 noon on Friday. And this may be not bad for everybody, but I just have to try and focus myself because I have so much to do too. So if you get it before 12 noon on Friday, and then I will read
I've
Friday
actually already
afternoon.
sent you, so I hope to see you on Friday then.
Right. But I'm just saying that for me, the better schedule is to just send something very close to that time because I get, obviously, like everybody,
Okay,
hundreds of
okay.
emails a day,
Pardon my
you know?
intrusion then. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
It's okay.
No worries. And I'll look forward to seeing it.
Sure.
Ram, let me continue with this. So,
Yeah.
for everybody, this is something we can do for ourselves. Have we decided who our protagonist is? Our protagonist is the person who's going to change at the end. So I'm going to continue to illustrate with my rather clumsy fists in opposition symbols here. Okay, so once we decide on the protagonist, then they have to go all the way through. So, like, it seems to me, if I were to be quick about it and think about it, and this is the pre-thinking that we can do that's going to make sure that we at least try to get this initial form on the page so that we're in competition with everyone else who's already done that, right? And it's not easy. This is the thing that brings us up to the level of storyteller, right? As opposed to the level of typer. Typist, storyteller. This is the difference. The difference is that the storyteller creates energy on the page. And they create a
Right.
result of the conflict, which is something that the reader learns from. That's it. It doesn't matter what they learn. It doesn't matter. None of those things matter, but that this action occurs. So, Rama, so if I was thinking about this piece, I would have Rama already, basically what happens in this piece is he protects his loved one. He protects the person he's bonded with. So how do I make that happen in a story? Well, I have to have his loved one be attacked, right? And then how can I show that something has happened? So Rama is our character. His loved one is attacked by the crowd, right? By the townspeople. How do I show that something's going to happen in that? If they're attacked, if Sita is attacked and he simply allows her to be attacked, or he thwarts them from being attacked, he's just coming like this. That doesn't necessarily reflect a change. He's a person that always would have protected her. He's a person that would never have protected her, right? But we can't have that, because we can't have the protagonist comes in, the people do this, but actually he just ends up being the same at the end. That can't be.
Correct.
It has to have an opposition that creates the energy, that creates the change. So I could see Rama being a person who comes into this maybe feeling ambiguous himself about what he feels about Sita, right?
Yes.
He's neither going to protect her nor not going to protect her. He simply hasn't been challenged. He's simply actually passive in a lot of ways. When the townspeople attack, then he is activated to do something. And perhaps he's activated basically. So when I say activated, that's like I've spoken before about character commitment, but he's activated to, let's see, comes in, attacked. He's activated to betray her. Okay? So he's going to go along with the townspeople. So actually the townspeople are not the antagonist. They're just the beginning of the problem. That's the ground situation. And he's going to betray her. But then what happens? Then Sita comes in. And she says something like, I love this. Do you long for the forest life? That is a great line. That's a deep line, right? That's a literary motif, in fact, right? The idea of what they call the eternal return, right? So the idea that we can be in this state of consciousness and difficulty and somehow return to the forest life, which is like it's like a pre-conscious state, a state before the ideas of mortality, which means also the state before ideas of binaryism, right? Not to get too heady about it.
Okay.
I know you understand what I'm saying.
Right.
But that's a little bit of what we're having. And so when Sita comes in and confronts him with, do you want to get back to the forest life? Do you long for the forest life? That is a big confrontation. Do you want to abandon the difficulty of living the life that we have and somehow return to a life that we don't and can never return to? Sounds a little bit to me. Then I think you could have something. So I don't know what happens, but that's a way to describe the story with these ideas in place. Let's look a little bit here. So I think it's worth thinking about for you, like you're going back and you're telling this ancient tale, right? And I know that's going to fill you with a lot of feelings and emotions. This is a foundational tale for you. It's a foundational tale for your culture and everything. So that's going to give you a lot of trouble in a sense. And it's like, and what we do when we have a lot of trouble, Ram, I know you know, I know, everyone here knows. When we have trouble, what do? We try to avoid it. Right? Yes. That's what we do.
Yeah.
That's us.
You got it. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're human beings, right? When we're this person, this is coming at us, we go, woo.
Right.
That's so actually what I just did right there. So this is the difference between story and life. Right?
Okay, right.
That's the difference between stories and life. In stories, this takes place. In life, we avoid trouble all the time and we just try and get to the end. We're like, can I please God get to the end without changing one iota and arrive at the finish line, whatever that is, right? Rather than take the chance of becoming transformed into something different. I think that that basically does describe the difference between, let's say, art, stories, and life. And it actually brings up a concept that we can just all jot down. That's that in literature we call it the imitative fallacy. The imitative fallacy is this: that we are creating a story that imitates life, and that's a story. And I'm going to say that's not true. So if we write the story that goes like this and avoids the conflict and does not arrive at any change, that is an imitative fallacy because that imitates actual life. We are not writing actual life. The reason we say this is a story is because that conflict has not been avoided. That is the difference between the two. This is as well said as I've ever said it. So when we look at this story in the beginning, we see that there's some trouble. That, like, I will just say, like, something to think about, like the language, awash, sally forth. I feel like you're writing a 19th century British novel.
Yes, point taken.
You know, and so for you, the question should be, why? Why are you doing that? You know, why are you not, you know, creating your own language and your own intention? And we already know the answer. You're actually avoiding doing that, right? As I make the joke, her translucent skin, I always thought translucent means you can see through it. So I was like, ah. I was like, oh no. I mean, that truly would be.
It's not transparent, it's translucent, but yeah, okay. I mean, if you look at classical poetry, that's one of the ways in which a woman's skin is described. So yes, you're right. This is not even 19th century British novel. This is probably 3rd century classic.
Yeah.
The kind of descriptions.
You might have meant luminescent, but anyway, she's so idealized here. I mean, there's some great moments. I love this. So let me tell you a few things just quickly for everybody. So these are a couple little rules that I would like really try and suggest you live by. So we begin in this first part with the private garden, blah, 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 blah. I'll just go blah, 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 blah. I don't mean to be offensive about that. But, you know, you're writing about, you have a paragraph about the garden. I don't know who the point of view character is. I would take this sentence, the reason I have it marked here, right? Sita, her head on Rama's lap. She might not be the protagonist. We've discussed that already. It depends who changes at the end. Who does this story affect, basically? That's going to determine who our protagonist is. So that's how we should gauge it. But let's say it is Sita. If you choose Sita, then she must be the person who meets the other force. This is Sita coming in. This is the force that meets Sita. And then she is transformed. Right. So that's the deal. That's the contract. Do not, all of us, do not diverge from that contract. If we don't diverge from that contract, we basically haven't even entered the field of play in order to write a story. Is my suggestion. It's like, whatever, you have a cricket match and you haven't even taken the field because you're not playing cricket. We got to get up to the point where we are playing cricket. So anyway, in this suggestion, I would just move Sita up here and actually see how much better this already reads. Sita, her head on Rama's lap, lay on the swing that rocked back and forth. The squeak of the hinges punctuated by the quoo, quoo, gutur of bird calls. I love that sentence already. So it's just her. She's there. I'm placed with her in the story. I'm following her. I know she's the protagonist. You're asking me to identify with her, and I do. I have begun the story with the willing suspension of disbelief, which means I will go where you lead me. I've already opened the book. I am willing to be Sita. I'm willing to be Rama. I'm willing to be the dog that's over in the corner. I'm willing to do anything that you direct me to do. That is my willing suspension of disbelief. What I'm disbelieving, right, is I'm willingly suspending that I am Sita. I'm willingly suspending that I am Rama. I'm willingly suspending that I am the dog in the corner. That is my willing suspension of disbelief. Which means I've entered into your imaginative space. But the minute you blow it with me, I leave the willing suspension of disbelief. I leave your imaginative space. I become me with all my problems. And the fact that I have to do the dishes, the laundry, I have to get my kids to school. You don't want me to have any of that. You never want me to leave this place, the willing suspension of disbelief. Never. And so we cannot diverge from the contract of the story that allows me to always know where I am and who I am in terms of this protagonist. And so I'm riding, I'm riding along with them, right? I'm sitting on the top. Ah! Right? Amazing.
Yeah.
So we have
this
that
is very
first
powerful.
sentence. Yeah, so we have that first sentence, and then the bird calls, and then we say the private garden of Rama. That's fine. That paragraph, now that I'm situated with her, now I can hear about the garden because I understand that you're just defining the space for me. But I know who I'm with. I know who is the protagonist. And I make a decision the moment, like I might read Sita, and I might say, like, let's say I know this story, and maybe I am a reader that's like, I don't want to be Sita. Maybe I am that jerk, you know? You're not going to get me as a reader. That's fine. You're never going to trick me, though. It's never a trick.
Yeah.
Either you get me or you don't. That is the deal we make with our reader. We cannot control it. If they don't come with us, they don't come with us. But we'll never try to trick them. Bait and switch. I'm reading about this private garden and that's what I want to do today. I just want to read about this garden and suddenly I'm confronted with Sita. I'm like, oh my God, I'll never get that last paragraph back. I'll never get that time back in my life. And now I resent you for doing it to me. So we'll never do that. Start with your protagonist. Get your protagonist on the page right away. I love this sentence because the first word in it is Sita. I love that sentence already because of that. All of us can do it. Every one of us can do it. So that's one thing. Bring that up here. And then you sometimes have unable to decide whether to shield her face or stare at it. Okay, this whole sentence threw me way out. Because the relationship between these two of them is idealized. Okay, I've had a lot of complex relationships with a lot of human beings. They've never been like this. So this is not human beings having an interaction. To me, it's a kind of, shield her face from the sun. Does she really need that? I mean, has she never been in the sun before? I mean, how protected must she be? And another thing is, I personally would not want to have a relationship with someone who needed that level of protection. That's quite a burden, Human beings, we go out in the sun, we get rained on, we even have emotional trouble and get hurt and break our arms. We survive. That's across the board, all of us, and including animals. So for that matter, so I'm being thrown out with this idealization of the relationship. It's not one that I can understand. It's happening in an alien world. Idealization is also alien to us because it's not real. It doesn't respond to the reality of the physical laws. So, yeah, there you go. Ram, that's
Right.
We don't want to go between the points of view. We want to have the story form. We want to get the protagonist on front so that the reader. Because I'm making this edge here. This is the first word of our story.
Right.
There's no time for doubts. This is the time right here at this edge of my story when I have the willing suspension of disbelief. This, when I read the first word, not when I read the fifth word. So this is when we start doing our work right away. The work that I'm suggesting is actually, all of this work that I'm saying now is so much for us in time should become pre-work, right? We do this work before
Right.
we start typing anything because you can see how much time it will save you. What
Yeah.
you've done here, Ram, what you've done here, though, I'm not saying that it's not without value. It is with value. I mean, it's sort of exploratory. One thing you're saying by writing these pages is you're saying, I want to write about these people. They intrigue me for some reason. I'm drawn to write their story. So the question is, why? Dig into that. But you've already made an absolute, you've committed some of your life to writing about their story. So clearly you care about it and it means something to you. But I'm going to say this about us as authors. You don't know why. You're not going to know why until you've written the story. Until you, through
Right.
their story, we work out this conflict, right? In our story, but why do we do it? We do it not just to do hack work, which we can do. Of course, we can do it just to do hack work. Fine, and lots of people do. But that's not why I write stories. I write stories to do this work so that I can find out something new for me. Why am I driven to explore this? It's kind of a thought experiment, right? Where I'm creating these characters, real characters that I identify with, and put them into a struggle that something happens out of so that I learn something. That's why I'm writing a story. It's then my feeling is it's really the archive, right? The thing that we've printed and we publish is actually the archive. I'm really publishing the archive of my experience exploring this. And it's a lot cleaner. And I've done all the work. And it takes the reader, an hour, 2 hours, maybe 3 days to read the work that I've struggled with for years. So they get the quick version, So I think you have an interest in this, and I think that you can formulate and sort of attack it more, obviously more
I'll do that.
in a more direct way. But I think it's a great piece for us to talk about. It's a great piece for us all to learn from.
Thank you.
So, who do we have next?
Let's see.
I think Sricharan had a question. He had his hand up.
Yeah, I had a question regarding Ram's piece.
Yeah, sure.
So you said that Rama's and Sita's relationship, it is ideal, right? As depicted in the story. But it is supposed to be ideal by the way the original Valmiki had intended it, I guess. What I mean to ask is that if it was supposed to be that way, then
So I can't do this work. I can't do this work for you. This is what you have to grapple with. I'm telling you this thing that I believe is a fact. If the reader cannot identify with the characters, nothing is happening in the story for the reader. Our problem it's not about the story. I'm not trying to dismantle the canon or anything like that. I'm not trying to do anything bad to anyone. Okay, I just want to say I'm not a good person either, but I'm not a bad person. Okay, so I'm just saying what I believe is a truth about the relationship between the story and the reader. We need the reader to be able to identify with the protagonist in order to go through the change with them. That is why they read the story. If they cannot identify with the character, if they cannot so I start the story with the willing suspension of disbelief, but then I'm reading about this person sitting there and shading the sun from this woman's face, and I'm like, it's like no relationship that I've ever understood. I can understand someone doing that, and I think it would be kind of maybe a little nuts, right? So I
Okay.
can understand that. And then that seems like that would be what the story was going to be about. So I'm interested in that. You know, I mean, I'm interested
Mm,
in Sita saying, why are you shading my face? It's like, well, the sun is so harsh. I don't want to. It's like, you are obsessed with with the way I look. And you're obsessed with my translucent skin. And I think you better realize I'm a human being if you want to have a relationship with me. So I can see that happening.
okay.
But I, Sri Charan, I really appreciate your question. I really do. And this is what you have to grapple with. I think. Like, so the depiction in the canon or the depiction coming out of the stories, right? Which I only, I don't know a lot about your traditions, but I know something about the traditions of storytelling. I know something about the traditions of the oral literature that gets passed from storyteller to storyteller. I know something about it. You know, finally, writing develops as a technology and writing them down. So stories serve different functions for people that were very important and continue to serve very important functions for people. Stories are the um, stories have made human beings human, I believe. That's my personal mystical feeling about it. So we can think about why stories in their original form 4,000 years ago and before maybe idealized characters. We can think about why that would have been. Again, I want to say everything that we know and we understand about a story is the result of a choice of some kind, which is a choice to do this thing and not everything else. And I do believe that we can discover the reasons for those choices. My personal belief system.
Yeah, I get it.
But the thing is, my bottom line is we just don't have a choice about, we have to do. So I basically, I have ideas about what works. We're not forcing anyone to read it. We're not forcing them to sit in a pew. We're not lecturing at them. We don't get to do any of those things when we write. This is what I love about writing. The person has a book, they don't like it. I'm reading, I'm into it, and then I read about some idealized relationship that I don't understand, and I go like this. I don't read it anymore. So we don't have a choice about that. This is our struggle. I mean, you think we have an easy time? We don't. We're on, we're dealing with human beings, and so that's what I'm talking about. We have, on the other side of our story is a human being, and what's interesting is that human being is actually just like us. So we can understand this human being by understanding ourselves, and then I think we can come to the place where we're like, okay, well, I hope you come to this. You say, wow, Otis was right all along. No, well, maybe. That would be great. That's ideal. Send me an email if that happens. Um, but I think that's what we'll find when we look at ourselves. How many stories do we read that are not relevant to us? How many stories do we, that we weren't forced to read or weren't forced to read in
Mhm.
school, right?
Well, if I
So we
was
start.
forced, I won't read, but yeah, I get it.
I mean, I can tell you there was a lot when I was in school that I learned always, at a certain point I learned always how to get something out of anything I read. But that took a long time. It's not how I grew up. I was forced to read a lot of stuff. I was like, oh my God, I would much rather be doing something else. But then when I realized that I didn't have any choice, I was like, well, I might as well get something out of it. Okay, let's.
Karen has raised her hand. So do you want to go and ask your question? Karen, you can unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hi. So I just wanted to add to probably what was being said by the last speaker, who asked the question about the idealized relationship between Rama and Sita, and not losing that in the story itself. And I think from what Otis was saying, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if Sita is the protagonist, then the focus of the story would be how she handles the conflict or the energy that that she's dealt throughout the story. So it doesn't necessarily mean perhaps that the idealized relationship that Ram and Sita had has to be compromised, but the focus is on how Sita handles it. And we can probably even see Rama having conflict in his own mind about what Sita is going through. So the essence of the relationship is preserved, while the exploration of Sita and her emotions and her experience of being banished, and however that leads to her being transformed in the end, can be explored in this story. I'm not sure if that's something that perhaps would add to the story.
Um, yeah, I think that that's a nice comment. I mean, as you're talking, it occurs to me, it's like, again, I'll go back to everything we do is a choice. We don't, we, we can make, so it seems to me the story, which I don't know, but let's say I'm gleaning from what Ram has told me in the beginning. So the story is about a betrayal between these two lovers, right? So Rama apparently in this story does betray her, and they have a relationship that is intense, and yet there's the possibility for betrayal. So that is not idealized, right? Um, we don't have to include this sort of this sort of over attention see that someone should idealize someone and then betray them. That is not idealized. That's like not an idealized world. Does that make any sense? Like that does sound like a real world. I mean, human beings do idealize others. And then when we are sort of met with might be the physical reality of them, when we're presented with that physical reality, we do have a choice then to either accept them or reject them, right? And so that's not an idealized world. That is the real world.
Right.
What's depicted in the story, though, with the language, is a sense of idealization. I don't know that this idealization is actually the focus of the story, that that's what's being looked at as a question of character. I'm instead only getting the gloss on the top. So I don't know. That's a complicated way to think about it, but I think in the end, it's just our reader has to just try to grapple as well as they can with reality. I obviously can't do it, across the board with every story, but I think that a person like, let's say it was Rama's story, and and he enters the scene idealizing Sita, and then he's confronted with the opinions. I mean, this is a story I can obviously relate to. He's confronted with the opinions of the masses, of the crowd, of the society, whatever, about the reality of Sita. She really lived with somebody else, right? That's a reality, right? So he's idealizing her and he's confronted with the reality that's being brought to him by the crowd. And now he has to make a choice. Does he want to love her in a real way or not, right? So that sounds like real life to me. That's not being idealized. And I would argue if you see a little bit with Ram's story, I don't know, maybe it's going too far. When you read his language, you see this idealization, but the idealization is really captured in the language and the focus. But the story itself is not idealized. The story is real. So it really depends, how are we going to depict it and how are we going to show our focus. There's I don't know. It's a difficult thing to discuss. So, I mean, I want to say there are no unreal stories. The real story is there. Now we have to go. Now we have to go for it. Anyway, it's something for the writer to grapple with, and this is our struggle.
Thank you.
I don't mean that to sound glib, because I know that it's a real, true struggle. Let's look at Sri Charan's piece. Maybe like the other one. Maybe you could read the beginning of this and tell us what you're working on here. Can you read the first page for us?
Yeah, sure. The silver crescent of the moon was still not above the dome when we retired to our Shrinagraham, tired and drained. Pujavati freed herself from the jewelry and prayed to her gods, as she did every night before she slept. I envied her gods, Indra above all. His Airavata, the fight-trunked elephant, fascinated me the most. A mendicant wants to be a king and a king wants to be a god. I smiled at my petty fancies. Why do you smile, Narsoma? Pujavati asked, her hands on her hips. She was one of the few who knew my true name. Do I look awful without my trinkets? She asked. Those trinkets look dull before your radiance, grey hairs, I remarked. A faint smile played on her lips. Damned smiles. She always got away with those faint smiles. How many years had it been? 90, maybe more. Sleep well. Pujavati kissed my head and went to bed. I unwrapped the cannabis powder and heated it near the torch at the door. I absorbed the fumes as much as I could till my eyes burned. Too much. I sneaked to the bed and pulled the woolen blanket over my head. Pujavati was already snoring lightly, so I did not disturb her. Soon, I felt my eyes drop and just push away the cold air that slipped through the slits of the blanket. I floated in a deep, dark void, ecstatic and unwilling to move, swimming in a complete ignorance of the world. A sweet rushing song trickled in my ears, mingled with the short melodies of parrots and cuckoos. The song was of Mother Earth, uninterrupted and uninhibited by the deficits of human abilities. Sweet scent of sami and pilu leaves trickled my nose. My eyes would not open easily, but when they finally did, I saw dirty yellow trees with grey trunks, blurred and blunt, with their canopies brushing each other. The singing river ahead of me appeared dark blue, oddly clear amidst the grey mountains behind it. I could see those mountains, and the river tipped the horizon. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Great. So, Sri Charan, so as an example, I think that this, to me, as I'm reading this feels precisely real. This does not seem idealized to me. And so,
Okay.
I mean, the conversation between them, and why do you smile? For one, it's within the quotes, but I feel like I'm absolutely here, right? The relationship between these two people seems real. The husband, she says, "Why do you smile? Do I look awful without my trinkets?" That's a little bit of real human insecurity, perhaps. Or at least it's a suggestion that it might be there, even if she doesn't really feel it, right? It's something to say, and she says it. And then he remarks, "Those trinkets look dull before your radiance, gray hairs." It's quoted, so yes, the thing that we know about it, what's real, is we know he says it. When we quote something, he's saying it, right? And so, does it absolutely represent some kind of idealized love? No. I mean, we say lots of things that don't represent idealized love, that's without any blemish or blame or whatever. We say things that are right in the moment and that are true also. I was so fortunate to have a mentor in my life who was much older, and he had a relationship with his wife that was so profound. It always, to me, served as an example of what I should try to attain. Right? I mean, they seem like real people to me, and I identify with them. So I love the details in here in this beginning. I mean, you've really, I remember your work, and you're really developing these details in this historic work, and it's really drawing me in. I don't know where you get I unwrapped the cannabis powder and heated it near the torch at the door. Beautiful. I don't know if that's historically accurate or not. I can believe that it is. I am in this world. You know, I absorbed the fumes as much as I could till my eyes burned too much. I sneaked to the bed and pulled the woolen blanket over my head. She, you know, his wife is already snoring, so that's not idealized. You know, I mean, that's like, she's like, you know, you know, idealized is, you know, my wife was, you know, don't want to be too crude, but like farting rose petals. You know, like that's idealized. Okay, that's not reality. This is reality. She's snoring. So, and it does a lot for us to draw us in. Can you tell us a little bit more of where this? So, tell us a little bit more like what you're looking for in total, and then what's going on just here.
Yeah, okay. So in this story, what happens is Shalya will have some dreams from a demon who is trying to possess him, sort of. So it is one of those dreams. I did not, describe the previous dreams, but in this scene, I am describing one of the dreams here, where a crocodile catches a deer. Here, the deer is Shalya himself, and the crocodile is symbolic of that demon. So it's not a direct demon interacting with the person Shalya here, but it is sort of some symbols. The goddess giving him warnings such as that this guy is coming for you, so be careful, like that.
Okay. So I remember I brought up, you know, like hopefully you're getting the little Otis demon on your shoulder that's like talking like me. And I told you that I have one too, and his name is Bill Harrison. And so I know I've said this to you before because I think I've read this piece and with dreams in it. And so I'm just going to tell you what he said. He said, you're allowed in your entire writing career to write 3 dreams only. Is this going to be one of them? I love that statement, and it's worth thinking about, like, why he's saying that. He's saying, for one, he's saying that writing dreams is a bit weak. So when we write things, there is a kind of hierarchy, I think, in terms of how effective they can be. Real people, the depiction of real people, okay? So we already recognize that we're talking about someone else. So even when I say, you know, Sita was in the garden, that's already not Sita. I'm not seeing her, right? It's a representation of Sita. So I'm once removed from reality. But writing things that are real and concrete are the most effective things to bridge that distance. I'm there at the willing suspension of disbelief when I opened a piece here. One of my willing suspensions of disbelief is that when I read the word Sita, it is Sita, right? When I read the word garden, it is a garden. That's one of my suspensions of disbelief. So I'm one stage away from actual reality. Does that make sense? So for that reason, concrete language, concrete descriptions, writing about the cannabis, writing about the character doing something, heating it, is stronger than writing a dream, which is something that's mental and not actually concrete. I have a long story about a bear that I could tell you, and maybe I will some other time, but I took a lot of time and good time, I think, with Ram, so I won't go into that, but concrete objects are better than symbolic objects. Even for this reason, the heating the cannabis is stronger than the dialogue, because even dialogue, it's said by a character, but once we're in the dialogue, it's just words. It's not as strong as, you know, I can say, hey, listen, you keep doing that, I'm going to hit you with a hammer, is a lot less powerful than hitting someone with a hammer, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? So I think you write this dream beautifully. I think you want to think about it. There's a lot that we can go back into issues of reality again here in the dream. Like you're writing the dream and you're saying it has a symbolic quality. So are symbolic qualities real or not? That's a good question. Do people really dream symbols or don't they? I've always appreciated this comment about dreams. Everyone in your dream is you. That makes sense to me in regard to reality, because in the dream space, I'm inventing everything. So they must be reflections of me. I've liked that. I think that that's something for us to kind of take away in terms of our understanding of dreams. Some Freudian dream analysis is like, oh, I mean, this is actually based in Freudian dream analysis in its way. But, you know, when we go into Freudian dream analysis, it's often just like this means this means this. But that's not all that's going on. It's also, you have made it, right? The symbolic quality is a way to try to understand what it is that you've made, I think, rather than being a symbol. Sritron, it looks like you froze a little bit, but did that make sense?
Yeah, I understood. While writing this, I had this Freud concept actually. So that's why I had to change the entire very concrete scene, very direct scene into this symbolic depictions.
Yeah. So there's it might be worth looking at, you know, Crime and Punishment is a book that I read when I was young, and it was very influential for me. And then I just loved all the Russian realists. So I read everything by the Russian realists. If it was a Russian realist, I read it, basically. That was directed me for a lot of years. I then taught that book also for 7 years, I think. And not always, maybe 6 years. So I taught a lot. In there is a dream. It's worth taking a look at. Look at how long it is in relationship to the rest of the work. Look at the purpose that it serves. I think that one thing we want to do with everything we write is understand that we're writing a sequence of events. And by that, I mean a sequence of reading events for the reader. Something happens in the beginning. We have this moment. I mean, you are cueing this dream probably with the cannabis, so it makes it more evocative and more, it has more of these sensory details, and I think that that's great. I think the writing of it is wonderful, but the question is, how long will your reader tolerate it, given the fact that a dream is less potent than writing concrete detail with characters acting? That's really your issue. But in writing, and again, I want to say this for everybody, I'm not making any rules about what you should do. Right? So like Bill Harrison's being funny. He says 3 dreams and that's it. But it's meant to push you to be like, writers we deal with problems. We have to recognize that it's a problem, however, if we're going to deal with it. This is, again, universally true. If we don't recognize that we have a problem, we're definitely not fixing it. And so I'm telling you what the problem is. The problem is that the reader's ability to be in the dream is somewhat limited. And the duration of time that you're there might also have the reader, step out of the work, and you don't want that. And the other thing is that we also want to see the relevance of every section. This happens, it's relevant to what's going to happen next, right? All of those things are important in order to keep the reader in. And in regard to this writing, if you take some of these things into account, you are writing at a very high level. Right now, it's a little bit wishy-washy about whether you're taking all of these things into account. But if you do, and I see that you definitely have a willingness to take, I don't see anything that I've said that you haven't really taken on and struggled with and made happen, right? So take on this level too, and this will be effective. I don't know why this guy now in this excerpt has to have this dream now. And I don't know how it sets me up for what's most important, which is what's going to happen next, and make me wonder about what's going to happen next. So let me go back to, it's been so long since I've read Crime and Punishment, but in Crime and Punishment, you have Raskolnikov, he's thinking about committing a murder so that he can get money so that he can go back to school and save humanity. That's a nutshell of Raskolnikov, right? Then he has this dream about being a boy and walking by and seeing this peasant beating a horse with a whip, and he beats the horse to death. Right? We knew already that he's planning on killing someone. Then he has this dream about a horse being murdered. We see the connection between those two things. And then we know that they're speaking in a way, is the dream going to affect then what he does in relationship to his plan? We wonder. Having the reader wonder what's going to happen next is an extremely powerful thing that we use as storytellers. And it's built by A, we know that he's planning on killing someone. B, he has a dream about a horse being killed. C, will he kill them or not? Not to be a spoiler, but he does. Which is then surprising, right? That's actually a reversal. He had a dream that basically was, he even interprets it himself as being a dream that he must not kill as he's planned, right? That's exactly what you want to do. We'll just follow Dostoevsky in this, but then he does do it. That's called a reversal. So think about that. The masters who have come before us have done these things. We're not reinventing the wheel, because the wheel is the human being, and that's who we're writing for. So, and stories work. They work with human beings, and so we can follow the direction of the masters who've come before, and if we do those things, it will work for us too, because the human being has remained relatively consistent. But this is wonderful work, beautiful writing, and I look forward to seeing it rise to the next level. I mean, you're writing beautifully, so this form that I'm talking about right now, for all of us, is a next level form, right? So just like in Dostoevsky, setting up, he's thinking about committing a murder. He has a dream in which a horse is murdered. He comes out of it saying, I must not murder anyone. And then the next day he goes out with the axe to do the murder. This is this level of activity, because I'm not getting it sentence by sentence. I'm getting it because of the sections, right? And you're doing the same thing. We're all working in these sections, which are basically the building blocks. I have a block here that talks about his plan. I have a block here that has the dream. I have the block here that gives us his feeling about the dream, which he remembers, and understanding. He actually even uses the symbolism. He's like, well, clearly the horse is the old woman, and clearly the message is that I should not kill her, right? It's also wonderful psychologically, because the person who's least able to interpret their own dreams is yourself, because there's already a reason that it's encrypted in your dream. And then he goes on. So, but yeah, wonderful work. Do you have any questions?
No questions. Yeah, I'll try, but the deadlines are approaching for this story. So.
Oh yeah. Wait. What was that last thing you were saying?
Nothing. Like, I'll try to change as much as I can about this stream, but this took me a lot of time, so I was kind of unwilling to remove this.
Well, I'm not saying that you need to remove it. I'm just saying that make sure it can be almost as little as like when he lay down to bed, he thought to himself, what decision am I going to make in this war, right? I mean,
Yes.
you can do it as simple as that. And then we have this dream, and we know that we're going into a dream. And then when he comes out of the dream, he's like, the answer was clear. I must not do this thing, right? That's all Dostoevsky is doing. He's just doing it in a bigger way, which we want to do. We don't want it to be obvious, but we can, as writers, we can reduce it to that, to make sure that we're covering these steps. That this leads to this, leads to this, leads to this. But yes, it takes a lot of time. Believe me, I know. time is our issue.
Hmm.
So that's why we talk about all these things. Ideally, we can talk about these things and get them in our head. If we can, I'm doing it for myself and I'm sharing it with you. I'm not doing it for you. I do it for myself because I want to save my time so that I write things that are as close to effective as possible. But that's also not always possible. We write what we write. And then also, Hemingway said, no piece of work is ever finished. It's only abandoned. So keep that in mind. You're going to write this piece as well as you can write it now. You can't do something else. So embrace that and write it as well as you can, and then take that as a win, right? That's what we do, and that's you right here. And then you're going to write your next story, and hopefully, and then you'll take that as a win, and then you'll write this one. We can only do what we can do. This is our lot, in life.
Yeah.
But it's really coming along wonderfully. I love the interaction between the two characters. I love the smoking of the cannabis. It's great. So, and the dream is wild and hallucinatory, and I like that too. But I do want to feel like it's not just you indulging yourself as a writer, but actually integral to the plot.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great.
Thank you, Otis. Yeah, thank you so much.
Madhavi.
Hi, Otis. Good morning.
Hi, how are you? You're a little bit
Hi.
quiet.
Um,
Maybe it's because I'm
is
so
it
loud. That's better.
is it okay now?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll have you read the first page and talk to us a little bit about this story and what you're doing. And I really appreciate you. Do definitely mention that you're experimenting with writing in first person.
Yeah. This is
And
actually based on a true event. My daughter did cry for 2 days when a
gosh.
tooth was coming off. So I kind of wrote it for her and she liked it very much. So I thought
Oh,
I'll
that's
send it
good.
to you and take your feedback on this kind of writing.
Yeah, that's great. And I love this is something for us to realize, we have these stories about these historical figures and, with obviously they have this tremendous amount of importance, but there definitely is writing. Writing is all about focus in the end. And we'll come back to it. This idea of the protagonist, the antagonistic force creating energy, that is principal to us, but it doesn't matter actually what this force is, right? So like I'm going like this is like this big character Napoleon meeting Russia, blah da da, right? Because I read War and Peace, right? So that's obviously big, but it also can be like this person and this person. You think that's any less? It's not. It's not less. And you have a daughter who's crying because of her tooth. It's not less. So big
True.
things come in little packages, as we know.
So this was a refreshing change for me also to write something like this.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go ahead and read the first page, please.
Sure. It was 7:30 p.m. and I was in the kitchen preparing dinner. My little ones, M and B, were busy watching Masha and the Bear on the television. My husband had confined himself to the study, working from home. Mommy, little M came running into the kitchen, half yelling, half sobbing. One look at her tear-stained face made me lose control over the mixer grinder and the lid came off. The tomato puree flew out of the jar and splashed all over my apron as well as the kitchen platform. And there goes my soup, I commented, looking at the mess I had just created. M took in the scene and started crying with a renewed conviction. Probably she didn't like the idea of having a dinner without the customary soup to go with it. But her crying got my attention back to the main problem. Why was she crying? I removed my soiled apron and kneeled in front of her. The little girl hugged me tight and I tried consoling her by patting her back. That only worsened the situation. Her sobs turned into wailing. Hey, what happened, sweetheart? I asked, assuming the worst. Why are you crying? Did you fall? Have you twisted your arm or your ankle? No, you're standing just fine. Then what happened? that made her cry uncontrollably. Did baby we hurt you? He threw another toy at you, didn't he? When I didn't reply and kept on crying, I got up and went into the living room to confront my 3-year-old son. Of late, troubling his elder sister had become a hobby for him.
Okay, great, wonderful. So, so we talked a little bit about this story already. You wrote to me that you were experimenting with this first person, and it's great. I'm so happy that you are experimenting with something, and I definitely suggest that to everyone. Some of you who have been working on pieces for a long time, I'll say something and you'll be like, oh my God, Otis, why? And I'll sometimes suggest you just go ahead and write an experiment. Just try something new, shift the point of view. We're developing our tools and we're developing our strength when we do this. Did you notice anything that was either difficult or easy about writing in first person?
Oh, no, it was just my point of view because the story was mine in some way. I did cook up a lot of things here, but I was telling something from my point of view. So it came naturally this time.
Yeah, great. And then can you just tell us a little bit about what happens in the story so we can get some context?
Well, I go and the mother goes and confronts the 3-year-old. He is totally unconcerned, gives answers to her. And again, the little girl comes and hugs her mother from behind and says, I do listen to you and I brush my teeth twice a day. And the mother is confused that what has it got to do with her crying? And then the little girl ends up saying that my tooth is shaking. And why is it shaking when I brush my teeth twice a day? Father walks in at that point of time and says that it's time the tooth fairy visits our daughter. She's growing up. The tooth is going to come off.
Uh-huh.
And the mother feels very exasperated, like, why the hell, if you knew it beforehand, why didn't you tell me? He says, I just stepped out to bring ice cream for the kids. And he ends up tackling the situation in his own way, probably better than the mother.
Right. Okay. So that's actually a great description. So
Yes.
basically, so what we have in this story is the mother comes in. She has this problem of the daughter, right? If I'm getting it right,
Yeah.
is crying. She dumps over the soup, and then there's that, and then she's crying. The issue we'll learn is that she has this tooth pain, but the mother is just basically trying to solve the problem of the crying. And the way she solves that problem is she goes to the son and says, "Stop doing whatever you're doing," right? I mean, and has this sort of altercation with him that goes back and forth. But then the husband, who is sort of off stage this entire time in his office working, kind of comes in and da da da, saves the day, and becomes that guy, right? He's that guy who comes in at the end. We dads, we make this. We actually study this. There's a school. It's an art form in which we just come in at the last minute and we gives everyone ice cream, and then because we're solving our problem of like, oh no. So I think it's a very relatable story, and I really like that. So this story, partially I'm going to go back to this. In reading this story, some of what happens is it just sort of it wanders around a little bit. I'm not
Yeah.
clear about what's going on in terms of the protagonist force, right? It's not being focused enough for me. It's absolutely there. And the antagonistic force, right? And it doesn't finally emphasize that. So I drew up this little picture. This is the same thing I was talking about with Ram, and the same thing that we should always, in a sense, be talking about. This is some of the work that we should just, it's sort of, it becomes like our blood, right? This simple process becomes our blood. And Madhavi, I'm sure that you sometimes spin a tale for your children, or maybe you're starting to become more comfortable with that. it took me a long time to become comfortable with that and learn this basic process. But yeah, this is how we tell our stories to our children. We're like, oh yeah, the little, the little donkey was walking down the street and met a wolf, right? So little donkey's walking down the street and met a wolf. Okay, so here we go. The story has begun. What's going to happen, right? So here we have A, so I'm just going through this again a little bit, but A plus B equals C, essentially, or like mass 1 meets mass 2 creates the energy of the story. I'm going to go back to yours. So when I finish this story, there's quite a lot that's happening before the kind of antagonistic force, it seems to me, really enters the scene, right? There's this difficulty. The protagonist is there, and you said, it was 7 p.m. and I was in the kitchen. So I know I'm focused with this I character. It's a very easy and quick way to do that. Mm-hmm. When we write in first person, though, it can be difficult because, so when we write I, that's the character I, and we sometimes write as if we're just that character. But we actually, as a writer, have to be kind of two people. We have to be this character, understand their point of view, and write what happens to them. But we also have to be this writer who is constructing the protagonistic force and knowing that they're going to meet the antagonistic force and that this is the point of our story. And the change that happens to the protagonist is why we're writing. Does that make sense? Like, as a writer, we have to be able to be two people. We have to be able to be the point of view character. We actually also have to understand every other character in the story in order to write them well. And we have to construct the story. It really is the story form, which is a physical form that has one force coming, meeting another force, and resulting in some kind of change and energy, right? So I think that that's really all this story really needs, is a little bit more focus on that. It seems to me that the protagonistic force is kind of the husband coming in and saving the day. So, which means that, like, in terms of, so I'm gonna go through this. Look, I'm just gonna show everyone this a little bit. Okay, this is a wonderfully short story. Short stories are great. They don't take up a lot of the reader's time. We don't often have to do as much with them when they are short and sweet. I'm asking for 5 minutes of the reader's time. I'm going to give them 5 minutes worth of epiphany, right? It's a balance. If I take up 15 days of the reader's time, I better give them 15 days of epiphany, right? So it's a balancing act. And this is a wonderfully short story. I want everyone to look at it for a second. So we have this first page where she's in the kitchen and the child comes in. We have the next page where she basically comes out and she's confronting the boy, and it was going, he's dodging bullets, basically, again, something that we know quite well. And then we have this page where the husband comes out, right? We might see that's a little imbalanced. It actually doesn't finally get to the point of change, for the protagonist. The antagonist coming into the scene comes in at the end, right? So we've had 2 pages and then we only have a couple paragraphs, right, of the actual action of the story, and then we don't have the ending. Does that make sense? So what we want to do is we want to see our story as being actually more balanced. That's all. And that allows us to focus and then tell the story. So this is beginning to tell the story. And if you can do it in 3 or 4 pages, amazing. That's a great length of story. That's a story that a lot of people would want to publish because they're not asking a lot from their reader in terms of the time. It goes by quickly. It's the direction we're going. So the way I see our balancing act is basically like we write the beginning of our story, which establishes the conflict. And you actually do this. You do this a little bit. You have this great line up in the front. My husband had confined himself to the study. He was working from home. Did you do that on purpose, Madhavi?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. That's the problem. There's the conflict. She's making the dinner and he's confined himself to the study. Brilliant. So we do want to establish that conflict and so establish that conflict in the beginning and make us care. And then you have this scene of her cooking and the soup gets spilled. I think all of that's great and some of the struggles that she has. But in a way, those are the two, it's almost all of the beginning, because the two things we have to do in the beginning are establish the conflict, which you do in one sentence, and make us care, which you then basically do in 2 pages, right? I care. I understand her issues. I sympathize with her trying to solve this problem. So I am definitely with her. But it's 2 pages of the beginning. The husband comes in, boom, there's ice cream. That's really, that's the part that I would call the duration of struggle. So my form would be like this. We have the beginning, and you'll see, I'm going to divide up this screen into 4 sections. So beginning, duration of struggle is actually the middle. It's twice as long, basically, as the beginning. And then the resolution is another quarter. It's just base, like it's not etched in stone, but it gives us this rhythm that we are fairly used to in stories. And it concentrates us a lot on the struggle. It's sort of like I boxed for a number of years. So it's like the beginning is a little bit like ringing the bell and the 2 fighters come into the match, right? The duration of struggle is rounds 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? And then the last one is the knockout, right? That's the thing that we get. That's the energy that we get. So the duration of struggle goes back and forth like this until the energy of the ending. And so I think there's some sense of having that form here, but I think that this would be a wonderful story to look at. Right now, so I'll go back to Ram, right? So I said to Ram, when we write something, we make a choice, and simultaneously, we don't make every other choice. Okay? So the choice that you've made here is to, in this story, is to focus on this beginning section. And you've chosen also then not to write the duration of struggle, the conflict with the mother and the husband over this issue of providing the ice cream and not coming out of his study and just telling her that the tooth was hurting, So you've chosen not really to go to that. And you've also then chosen not to get to what would be the ending, the thing that she gets from it, and the thing that I also will get from it as the reader. So you've avoided that. And right, as I said to Ram before, the way life is like this. the protagonist is going, here's trouble, and then we sneak around it, So we avoid trouble. This story avoids trouble, right? And that's not what we can do when we write a story. So, but I think it's a great start. I love this domestic drama and being in this house. If you can make the house more, uniquely, it can be like your house or anything that's unique to draw me in with the details. I would love that. We'll learn from Sri Charan for that, to really go to those concrete details because they draw us in. But wonderful work. Any questions, Madhavi?
So far, got the points. I'll try to rework on this.
Yeah, it's a wonderful story.
Thank you so much.
I became immersed, and I saw. Gosh, it doesn't end though. My girls are 10 and 13, you got to realize with children, it's like there's us. They see us from a great distance, but they see each other. Oh my God, they see each other like this. You know, that rivalry between them, they're just eye to eye all the time. It's great. Ashvani, shall we talk about your work?
I'm ready.
You are ready. This is great. Oh, Ashvani, Ashvani, truly, I would have liked everyone to be able to read this story, and I was tempted thinking about it to have you just read the entire thing. I mean, it's just, and then we'll just learn from that. If you cut out all the adverbs, it would be much shorter, and we could probably do it. Okay, so let me give you a little brief rundown for everybody. So remember how like I was saying to Sri Charan, like those concrete details are the most effective things we can write. So when we think about that, we can also think that there's also this kind of gradation of words that also are a little bit on a hierarchy. Nouns are really strong. Nouns are strong. Verbs, also strong, because now we're actually seeing nouns in action, right? So like his character that takes the cannabis powder and brings it over to the flame and heats it up, very, very strong, because we have a noun, the character, heating cannabis, which is another noun. Very, very strong. The movie is going off in my head. Underneath that, adjectives. Adjectives are weaker than nouns because adjectives are just qualities of nouns, right? I'm not putting them down. You know, like a clownfish is a great noun, the clownfish, right? But the orange clownfish, orange is a weaker word. So I'm spending a little time with a weaker word. Below that, though, even below adjectives, Ashvani, do you know what word there is?
Adverbs.
You know what I've told you this before, right?
Yes.
An adverb is like a signpost that says weak verb ahead. Do we want to draw attention? If I'm going to have a weak word, I just want the reader to get through it. Okay? If I'm going to, so if I'm going to say he said, I'm not going to say he said imploringly. I'm not going to do that. Just get through it. Get to the next thing. But if I want to say he shouted, then I write he shouted, or he muled. Muled, you want to use that word, Ashwani, right? We don't use muling enough, do we?
No.
So, he muled. I might write that. Probably not. I'd probably just get through it. Let's have you read this first. Actually, let's have you read a little bit later. Oh, this is good. So let me just set it up a little bit. So this woman goes, we don't really know why she's going to, like a kind of a charity thing. She's going to this school for blind children who are also, a kind of disfigured in various ways, and we don't have an answer as to the why or wheres of those things. And this woman is very resistant and sort of repulsed by looking at these children. Ashvani, I think that that's a very, very good choice, obviously, because you're setting yourself up. This is, as a piece, I really would like everyone to read this because it actually demonstrates very much what I'm talking about in terms of a protagonistic force being met by an antagonistic force and resulting in a change. So that condition of story is met in this story. Is that everyone will, we want to acknowledge that, which means that we've brought this story up to the level of story. Now it means that we're competing with every other story that's ever been written, Ashvani, not just the ones that are being written today. We have to write something better than Chekhov. We have to write something better than Shakespeare. Well, not better. We just hope that someone will choose it for God knows what reason. So let me have you. Do you see this right here where that red mark is?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I'm going to move the page. I'm going to have you probably read the entire ending here, if you could.
Okay. Should I?
Yes, please.
Her outstretched fingers came into contact with Sunita's hand, and her tiny palms clasped Sunita's wrist with unexpected strength. Sunita stopped dead, nonplussed. The out of the blue assault unnerved her completely, and her heart missed a beat. She stood still, turning to look at the girl. Her face was angelic in all respects, except her eyes, which were opaquely milky and reminded Sunita vaguely of some movie on vampires, which she had started watching and abandoned halfway due to the appalling visuals. Sunita struggled with an impulse to prise her hand free and escape, but something within her thwarted such endeavor. She turned and looked at the guide beseechingly and waited to be rescued from her predicament. But the smiling guide seemed to find the situation unalarming. Sunita stood petrified for what seemed like ages to her, looking at the door that promised escape, unsure of her next action. Should she wrench her hand free and bolt out of the room, or ask her guide to help her? Or should she try to talk the little girl into relieving her hand? While her mind numbly evaluated these courses of action, the little girl abruptly let go of Sunita's hand. Startled, Sunita looked down towards the girl in disbelief. The girl had now outstretched both her arms towards Sunita in an unmistakable signal asking to be picked up. Sunita's face involuntarily contorted at the prospect of picking up that girl with those ghastly, opaque eyes. She hastened to undo her facial expression and felt relieved that the girl could not see her revulsion. But the girl's outstretched arms and upturned face held Sunita in a mesmerizing trance, and although out of the girl's grip now, she felt unable to flee the scene that so tormented her. Without warning, the girl smiled directly at Sunita. As if driven by an external force, Sunita bent down distractedly and picked up the girl to support her on one arm, while the other gingerly cuddled her into snug safety. The girl freed both her putty palms from the folds of Sunita's dress and caressed them over Sunita's face and hair. Sunita noted the intent look as she performed scrutiny. Having completed her examination, she let out a happy sigh, removed her palms from Sunita's face, stretched out her arms again, and clasped them around Sunita's neck, her face gently resting on Sunita's cheek. Sunita waited, noting incredulously that her need to escape had vanished. Presently, the girl unclasped her embrace, and Sunita put her down on her chair. Then she knelt down in front of the girl and reached out with her palms. As they came into contact with the girl's cheeks, she gently moved her fingertips over the girl's lissom face, replicating the girl's action of some moments ago. On an impulse, Sunita gently shut her eyes while her fingers caressed the girl's cheeks. An indescribable emotion resonated through her, and unrepressed tears escaped her eyes silently. Time stood still in deference to the moment's solemnity.
Wonderful. So when so this story for all of us, you're doing this thing that I'm saying. Let's do this. Let's do this thing. We have a protagonist who is well drawn. She is repulsed by these children. She feels coldly towards them. She's only concerned with her own feeling, right? Her feelings of revulsion. These things come up all over and over again. Her. We get that. The balance is maybe, we can say we get a lot of that. And then the girl coming in is, in a sense, short. If we're thinking about the duration of struggle, right? The problem, the confrontation with the antagonistic force, the duration of struggle, right? And then the resolution, it trails away, right? We're kind of front heavy with the characterization of the protagonist. We get the majority is that. Then the struggle that takes place between the two of them, which is really what you've read to us here, is somewhat vague, right? You don't attack it deeply enough. Which again, going back to what I said to Ram, and you're making a choice not to do that. And usually the reason we make choices is because we're trying to avoid what's difficult. That's why we do it. So we're human and we forgive ourselves and then we move on to do it in the next draft, right? But the story is there. So this story particularly, and we could look to other examples too. We're dealing with blindness. A great story that I read when I was in high school that really affected me actually, and probably was one of the pieces that led me to want to be a writer, was D.H. Lawrence's The Horse Dealer's Daughter. And in that, the horse dealer's daughter is blind. I feel, if I remember it correctly, and or I don't know. I mean, it's so long ago. I haven't reread it. But anyway, I would read that story and how that sort of covers what you have here. So we might see for all of us, I'm saying a protagonist, they meet an antagonist, and from that energy arises, right? So that is a story. And what we see in stories, and we can say in the thousands and millions of stories that we basically always have this principle. So it makes a certain amount of sense that we will have had this person who is unable, and actually this is almost universal, right? We have a person who is unenlightened, right? They're unenlightened. They meet a force and it leads to an enlightenment. It doesn't have to be positive and idealized enlightenment, and often isn't. It's not idealized, everything is wonderful. It's, we live happily ever after, right? But there's some kind of enlightenment, an understanding of truth, right? That the character arrives at. Ezra Pound said, "Make it new." We can put that up on our computer and remember that. I'm not a fan of Ezra Pound since he's had some fascist tendencies that I don't approve of, but still he said something that was important. Make it new, Ezra Pound. So we are not inventing the story, because the story is a thing that's naturally generated out of who we are as human beings and what we want. We want the action of story. So we don't make stories, but we do make them new. And so we want to have the elements of our story be unique. So of the great stories that follow this energy pattern, which all stories do, there are some that have dealt with blind people and the enlightenment that comes in that way. In fact, Like we can even think of the Oedipus story, right, as being a story about enlightenment, right? And that involves a blinding of oneself. But there's Oedipus, there's the horse dealer's daughter, and then there's this great, actually, I'm wrong about this. So it's not Carver's Blind Man. Sorry, that's wrong. It's called Cathedral.
Yes, I read that. I
Ah,
found out that you meant actually meant cathedral, and I read that, and I understood what you were trying to tell me.
yeah, yeah, and that's a wonderful story. I personally think that Cathedral. Oh no, so D.H. Lawrence wrote. No. D.H. Lawrence wrote a story. Not it's not horse. So I got all of this wrong. So it's not Horse Dealer's Daughter. I want to direct you to D.H. Lawrence wrote Blind Man, and then Carver wrote Cathedral. Anyway, Carver, if you ask me, stole D.H. Lawrence's story and rewrote it as Cathedral. That's what I think. But both stories are great. D.H. Lawrence's Blind Man, fabulous story, amazing story. Really affected me, and completely new. And then Carver's Cathedral. Yeah, thanks. Sorry about getting those wrong. Okay, so let's just look at a little something here. In regard to digging deeply into what happens here with Sunita meeting this girl. This is, and the way it goes back and forth. Let's see, where you started here. Her outstretched fingers came into contact with Sunita and her with unexpected strength. I like that. Sunita stopped dead. Nonplussed is one of those words that I always get wrong because it always seems to me that nonplussed means to be plussed, you know? I've always, it's kind of oxymoronic to me. I never use that word. Let's see. Her heart missed a beat. She looked up. Oh, I love this line. I love this line. It feels so true. But the smiling guide seemed to find the situation unalarming. You know, and I think that that's such a great, true representation of life, Ashvani, that, you know, we can be having the most intense experience, but everyone around us is just like, you know, it doesn't mean anything to them. She's, you know, this woman who's the guide, she's for one used to it. She might even be used to this experience of someone coming to visit. There's all sorts of implications there that are just, whatever they are, feel very true. Sunita stood petrified. Let's see, oh wait, sorry, I want to say, her heart missed a beat. Okay, so that's the first one where you say like her heart missed a beat. So we're talking about something that might be true, but it's sort of moving us a little bit towards the metaphor of the heart, right? And the sort of the emotional core. And it's here where you are kind of vague, right? This is the thing. And yes, maybe, you know, emotions and these kinds of things that happen, they are vague. But for us as writers, this is the challenge that we're taking on. How do we make these things material? How do we dramatize them? How can we express something that's seemingly ephemeral, spiritual, emotional? How can we express those things with words so that the reader can feel it? This is our challenge. So you write, her heart missed a beat. She stood petrified, as if driven by an external force. So again, it's quite vague. What does that mean? But you're trying to get to what's happening with her because of this interaction with this child being held by her. And then she goes to pick her up. Sunita waited, noting incredulously that her need to escape had vanished. So in a sense, what's happened to Ashvani is she's solved the problem, but we haven't really gone through the struggle, to me. Does that make sense a little bit?
Yes.
Like, so when I say we want to introduce the problem, but see, the center of the story and the longest part of the story is the struggle. I don't know exactly how we went through that struggle to come to the knockout blow. Right? I haven't gone through the rounds. I haven't felt the punches. I haven't seen, the strategies. That's the thing I haven't experienced. So something happens that, according to our sequence, we begin here. We have this happen, this happens, and then the knockout happens. I don't know how we arrived at the knockout really. And that's the struggle. And when you read Carver, right? I mean, it's brilliant, of course. I mean, he rewrites The Blind Man, and The Blind Man is brilliant. And then Carver takes it, and the way he does it, right, is he has uh, the the protagonist who doesn't care for this blind man, right? The blind man says he wants to put his hand over while he traces the cathedral so that he can see it. So they're both having this sort of, one is leading the other through this sort of spiritual recognition of what the cathedral looks like. I mean, it's absolutely brilliant. That what Carver came up with to dramatize this union and bond, that's what I think that's what we're talking about. In my sense of human relationship, what we're talking about is bonding. And that, Carver captures that so well in Cathedral, and he has a vehicle for demonstrating it, right? The intimacy of the hand of this one man over the hand of this other as he traces over the cathedral. And here a little bit, it's almost, it might be a little bit more cliche. It's sort of like this woman is coming to her, what we might say is like a natural or even a stereotyped ability to have empathy with this girl simply by holding her. And that doesn't dramatize maybe that bond that develops as much. Does that make some sense?
Think about it, yes.
Yeah, I think so. I would love to see this story become more, add Ezra Pound, make it new, to see this place in its time, to see this actual school, not a vague school that could be anywhere but this school. I mean, I would love to see it in India. I would love to see it feel like it's Indian. I want those details to be here. If it's a kind of, you've written sometimes about this colonial period. If it's colonial, I'd like to feel that. All of those details are the things that make it new. And then I think that there's a deeper look at how can you show this bond that transcends, a woman feeling something for a child. That can seem cliche, but transcends that into something that's more potent about the bonding of human beings. That's what Carver manages, because he has his man, the guy who's jealous, and then it's the wife's ex-lover is the blind man, right? And D.H. Lawrence, I think, does the same thing. So that's part of the piece that Carver took. He took the story, but they say a novice borrows and a master steals. So Carver was a master. He stole, and you're stealing D.H. Lawrence's great story. So you're really, putting the smack down. Okay. Ashrani, this is wonderful work.
Thank you.
Abhinav, thank you.
Good. We had a very long, productive session, 2 hours to kick the year off. Folks, note that next week we will start half an hour earlier. We will go on for 90 minutes as we generally do, provided we have enough submissions. So please go ahead and send in your writing pieces. In the meantime, Otis and I will try and get together sometime during the week and see how best we can make some changes to the process. So We'll put this recording up maybe in a couple of days, 2 or 3 days, once it's available from Zoom, and we upload it on YouTube. So in the meantime, have a very good day, evening, and we'll talk again in a week from now.
Yep.
Thank you, Abhinav. Thank you,
Thanks all.
Otis.